In their last encounter, Geese managed to escape in a tower of flames, taking all of the Jin Scrolls with him. So, with this newfound life, what will Geese do? Well, today we find out, with the ultimate fight against Geese Howard in Real Bout, Fatal Fury. Welcome back to my Fatal Fury journey, where I document my experience playing through the entire Fatal Fury franchise in order. Today's a special day because it marks the halfway point for our journey, as we've beaten 3 games with only 3 remaining. Real Bout released in arcades in 1995, coming out the very same year as Fatal Fury 3, and with such a short turnaround for these 2 games, it makes me curious to see just how different they are from each other. Reviews from the time seem to praise the game, claiming it to be one of the best in the series, saying it's a huge improvement over 3. Though, looking back at the reviews of 3, I'm not sure my views align with these reviewers. But it's interesting to see that the people who previously thought that 3 was bad are now praising Real Bout for its new additions. So let's hop into it and see what it has to offer. Now immediately, the first thing that I realized was the fact that all of the character sprites in Real Bout are ripped directly from 3, though considering its development time, that makes sense. In classic Fatal Fury fashion, the controls have once again been changed, returning back to a playstyle similar to the first game. A is for punch, B is for kick, and C is for strong attacks, with D now being the allocated lane switching button. You press D and it sends you back, and down and B sends you forwards. You can also use the D button as a way of hitting opponents that are in different lanes to you. I think for the time that this was a pretty good decision. As I said previously, pressing buttons like B and C together was quite difficult, and considering that they only had 4 buttons to work with, makes sense that they decided to give it its own designated button. However, there is a bit of a learning curve to this, as I had to get all the things I had known from Fatal Fury 2 and 3 out of my head. Like sometimes I'd try to do a heavy kick only to jump into the background. Another new addition to the formula is destructible objects. Each stage will have a destructible object on either side. If you manage to destroy it, any character that is hit into that zone is now out of bounds and it counts as an instant KO. This is a really fun feature. It really keeps you on your toes, and it's unique for a fighting game to give you an option to win that isn't timing out or depleting your opponent's health. However, it made the game insanely easy to cheese for some fights. I could just go to the corner, destroy the object, and then hit them in it, and that's the game. Doing inputs in this game is now as easy as ever, and thank God too. Now I'm finally able to do supers and commands every time without fail. This made playing the game much easier than the previous games, and because of this I actually decided to go some rounds with my good friend Ghana, and in all honesty, they were more difficult than any boss the game threw at me. Anyway, with the gameplay explanation out of the way, let's get into the game. Geese is back with the Jin Scrolls to boot, and he uses his new revival to host another King of Fighters tournament, hoping to get revenge for his death in the first game, and to prove himself as the strongest. It's also implied from what I can gather that Geese actually destroyed all the Jin Scrolls, not wanting their immortality, but simply using them as a means to prove his own strength. He then destroys them to ensure that no one else can use their power. With this new King of Fighters tournament being held in Southtown, and with a bunch of familiar faces joining, Terry decides it's time to take on Geese once again. If it wasn't obvious already, this story of this game is kind of a retelling of the first game. It's kind of disappointing that the story is so simple, and it honestly feels a little lazy. But, giving it the benefit of a doubt, it was cool to see Geese as the big bad once again, While I really love characters like Krauser and Yamazaki, none of them really compare to how iconic Geese is as a villain. It's also kinda cool how, in Fatal Fury 1, Terry was the one driven by revenge and wanting to defeat Geese, but now the roles are switched and Geese is the one driven by revenge, wanting to kill Terry. Sadly, there's no new characters introduced in this game, so this is as arcadey as you can get here. The game throws you into one stage and pits you against 3 fights in a row, each taking part at a different time of day in the stage. After finishing each of the 3 fights, we get to see Geese as he's monitoring Terry's progress through the tournament, before we eventually reach outside of Geese's tower. Terry points to the sky, taunting Geese, and Geese can somehow see him from there? Dude's got eyes of a hawk, damn! Anyway, now it's time for the fateful rematch, and this stage is insanely cool. This is the only stage in the game without any out-of-bounds areas, and that's because it's a fully 3D stage that wraps around itself, meaning corner combos aren't really a thing here from what I can tell. I just wanted to point this out because it's not something I've usually seen in fighting games, and I just thought this was super cool. After beating Geese with a Power Geyser, he does what he does best and falls off a building. But this time, Terry rushes in to save Geese. He reaches out, grabbing his arm, and in response, Geese just slaps it away and falls to his death while laughing maniacally. We just see Terry with his head down, defeated. After all of that, it seems like Geese was the final victor after all. It feels kinda weird to see Terry so serious like this, but hey, after this we get a few small screens that show Terry's life after Geese's death. We see him fishing with Rock, upset that he wasn't able to catch anything. We get to see the two of them play basketball together, and then finally we get to see the two of them on the hill. Terry looks at the stars while Rock sleeps on his arm. I love seeing Terry's relationship with Rock. I'm not really sure how to explain it, but seeing Terry play a father figure role is just really sweet. I love this side of his character. And that was it for Fatal Fury Real Bout. The gameplay was fun, but it really felt like retreading old territory, and I was really disappointed with it by the time I'd finished. The only real saving grace for me was that it was really nice to see the animated cutscenes, and I love seeing Terry and Rock. But other than that, this game's story is like non-existent. It was very disappointing, especially considering how Fatal Fury 3 set the bar so high with its amazing storytelling. And with such a sour taste left in my mouth, I decided to check out this game's improved version, Real Bout Special. That's right, y'all are getting a 2-for-1, baby! Special is an enhanced version of Real Bout, the same way Fatal Fury 2 Special was an enhancement of Fatal Fury 2. However, I feel as though Real Bout is so drastically different from Special that it honestly feels closer to a full-on sequel. Real Bout Special was released 2 whole years after Real Bout, and the development time really shows. The game had an entirely new art direction with new stages, sprites, and a complete UI overhaul. It also brings back old characters that weren't in the original Real Bout. Real Bout Special's story isn't canon to the story of Fatal Fury, so it takes what Real Bout did with basically retelling the events of the first game, and gives it the same treatment to the second game, acting as a sort of what-if scenario if Krauser ever returned. And this game is absolutely mind-blowing with its presentation. Like, they went from the laziest thing I've ever seen in a fighting game to genuine, beautiful UI. It's a shame that the game decided to change its story around, because if it had the story of the original Real Bout, this would be such an easy replacement for that version. Though, like I said, this game feels more like a complete sequel than an actual improvement. The gameplay is exactly the same between the two, designated, lane button and all, but this time, fights are in their own unique stages with different times when you win or lose, bringing it back to the way we all know and love it from the previous games. The new sprites are also absolutely gorgeous in this game. I really love this style. It definitely feels a little more cartoony, but I really like it. Sort of reminds me of the Alpha games. It's very unique and charming, and I just absolutely love it. Speaking of looking great, fights now have dramatic intros to them, making each stage start completely unique. Sometimes it'll be something simple like the camera panning from the sun back to the fight, or something a little more complex like Krauser having a singer enter the screen before we reveal the actual fight. This game is flashy, hands down, and it improves on everything that Real Bout put down in its gameplay. If you're looking for a really fun fighting game, then Real Bout Special is the way to go. Special is incredibly fun, and it's quite easy compared to Real Bout too. I managed to beat the entire game in just one single sitting. Since the game isn't canon, the end credits are also quite silly, which is really funny to see. There was also another port of Real Bout Special released for the PS1 a year later. However, that game is so unique and interesting that I think it deserves its own video later down the line. So for now, that is both Real Bout and Real Bout Special. Games that were fun for sure, but didn't really have anything to say in the story department. However, seeing the crazy presentation from Special and just how flashy and fun the game was, I am more excited than ever to get to the next game, where we'll be having our last time with Terry Bogard as series protagonist. With that being said, thank you so much for following me on my journey, and I'll see you guys next time where we tackle Real Bout 2, The Newcomers.